Is it okay? Can you see the screen? Great.
Yep.
Yeah, so thank you very much, Eric, for introduction. And as Eric said a minute ago, I'll be talking to you about where in the body people feel the emotions related to climate change. And I mean, possibly when you think about emotions, like bodily sensations do not really come into your mind immediately. And I mean, indeed, if you just sit there, you're relaxed, nothing is happening, you feel in a sort of neutral state, you don't really pay much attention to how your body feels, how fast your heart is beating, how fast you're breathing. But as soon as something changes, for example, you're frightened, you really notice, you really pay attention to your bodily sensations. You notice immediately how fast your heart is pounding in your chest, that your breathing gets faster and more shallow, and you really, really notice that. However, what it's really interesting that we all experience of different sensations, but we may interpret them differently. And I guess a good illustration of that is giving a public talk or anticipating giving a public talk, when many people experience different sensations. For example, your face getting red, you feeling general jitteriness, palms getting sweaty, tremor in your legs, or your heart beating faster. And most of the people, many people would interpret these bodily sensations as stress or an anxiety about giving this public talk. But some people may say that all these bodily symptoms are simply reflect excitement, that you know, you have an opportunity to share your work, your research with other people, to communicate it to others. So given all of that, how do we actually study emotions in people? Well, one of the most common ways of studying emotions is simply asking people, like, how do you feel now? How do you think in these circumstances? How do you think in those circumstances? But this approach may be problematic, as people often have difficulties talking about their emotions and naming them. And this may be especially true when we are interested in studying complex phenomena and what people feel with regards to that. And certainly climate change is one of those problems that evokes many different emotions, as we've heard already from two previous talks. So people may feel worry and anxiety about the future. They may feel anger about politicians and those in power. They may also fear sadness about the loss of natural habitats. And at the same time, they may also feel happiness that is related to climate action, to the activities, steps that they take, and see hope for the future. So when we have such a mix of emotions, some of them may be ambiguous and people may feel all those different emotions at the same time. How do we study that? Well, we decided to take a different approach. So first we ask people to map in their bodies where they feel different emotions. So for example, the participants were presented with an emotional word such as anger, and then they were asked to color in the body parts when they feel those emotions. And on one body, they were asked to mark where they feel activity in their body increasing or getting stronger. So that you can see here in red. And on the other body, they were asked to color in the regions where they feel the activity decreasing or getting weaker. And we ask people first to do it in relation to several different emotions, like simpler emotions such as anger, fear, happiness, but also some more complex emotions such as anxiety, love, contempt, shame, etc. When people did that, we then asked them to do the same for different phenomena. We included negative phenomena such as just war or COVID-19, and also some positive phenomena such as friends and summer holidays. But obviously the one that we were mostly interested in was climate change. And we included those different phenomena first to check whether we can differentiate those different phenomena from how people mark it in the body, or do they mark it all the same. And also as we were conducting this research during the pandemic, to sort of compare climate change body maps to COVID-19 body maps. So what did we find out? Oh, and before that, we also wanted to, with this research, what we wanted to see is what is climate change body expression similar to. Is it similar to anger? Is it similar to fear? Or is it similar to many different emotions at the same time? And in order to do this, we asked over 500 people to complete the study. It was a population recruited online via social media, mailing list, and also word of mouth. So we got mainly female participants, mainly young adults, but we had quite a range from 18 to 83 years old. But by no means is it a representative population. Importantly, though, we did not ask people only who were interested in climate change or who felt concerned about it. We actually did not mention that aspect at all. So we wanted to get a range of people who both concerned about the topic and those who are not. So what did we find out? So here what you see are the bodily maps of the emotions that we ask people to draw in the bodies. And what you see here in blue are the areas where people tended to mark as related to deactivation or the activity getting less in those emotions. And what is striking here is that depression, sadness, and neutral state is associated mainly with the activations, particularly in the limbs, while the warm colors are associated with increased activation. So these represents the body areas where people mark that showed higher activations, getting stronger in those body parts. So what is very interesting is that some emotions, such as happiness, for example, shows basically the activation nearly throughout the whole body, mainly in the chest and head, but it's clearly seen in the whole body. Some other emotions, such as, for instance, shame, you can see here this massive activation in the cheeks. It's very unique for shame. Disgust, for example, is really clearly related to digestive tract. You can see it here on the mouth, in the face, and also in the gut. So this is quite unique, and you can clearly see that there are each of this emotion has this unique map in the body. But as I said, we are mainly interested in climate change. So what did we find in relation to climate change body map and other phenomena? Here again, we see that each phenomenon had a very unique body representation of the feelings people feel with relation to that particular phenomenon. So for example, so for example, in relation to COVID-19, we had strong activation in the head, chest, and deactivation in the limbs. In the war, we see very strong activation in the chest and head. Friends seem to be evoking this very warm, fuzzy feeling in the chest, while the climate change is related to activations in head, chest, abdomen, and also hands. So from looking at just those global maps, it's difficult to see which emotion the climate change is most similar to. So in order to quantify that somehow, we did this similarity matrix. So what you see here is a relationship between each pair of emotion and phenomena. And the warmer the color representing that relationship, the more similar these pairs of emotions and phenomena were. And the cooler the color, the less similar these were. So for example, one pair of emotions that show one of the most biggest similarities was fear and anxiety. And what you can see here clearly is that both fear and anxiety were related to activations in virtually exactly the same part of the bodies. So upper body mainly in the chest. And a pair of emotions that were least similar to each other was disgust and neutral state. And this is because the disgust evoked this activation mainly in mouth and also stomach and guts and a little bit in arms as well, while neutral state evoked was related to deactivations in those body parts. But what is climate change evoked emotions related to? Well, climate change, as it turns out, is related to many different emotions, this climate change body map is similar to many different emotions. You cannot easily pick one emotion that is related to climate change, which also, I guess, is an agreement from what we hear from other studies of Michalina and Małgosia and Dominika. So what we see here is that climate change is very similar to several different emotions, such as fear, disgust, sadness, but also surprise, anxiety, and depression, and shame, etc., etc. But what I find quite interesting is that the similarity between climate change, body map, and war, which also showed very high similarity. So you can almost say that climate change is a little bit like war and how, what emotions it evokes in the body. Right. So what I show you so far is how we ask different people to draw in the body when where people feel emotions related to climate change and different emotions, and we average those maps together. And this is what we see here. What you see here, that for example, climate change is quite similar to anger, but obviously different individuals drew those maps differently. So for example, this one individual drew climate change as deactivation in head and some very localized activations in chest and stomach, while this person colored in activation in head, chest, and hands. But this other person drew activations related to climate change, mainly in head, shoulders, and hands, while anger was very much widespread, literally almost throughout the body. So what we were interested in is whether these individuals' differences depend on the level of climate change emotions and concern an individual expresses. So apart from asking people to draw emotions in their bodies, we also asked them to ask them several questions about the emotions related to climate change concern. So, for example, one of them was, my strong emotions related to climate change negatively affect my mood and daily functioning. And we decided to plot it. So people answered on a scale how much they this sentence applies to them, and the higher the number, the more affected they felt, and the more they agreed with this statement. And on the other axis, we plotted how much this individual's climate change body map is similar to the specific emotion. And we did it for all the 14 emotions that we asked people to complete. And then we plotted that. And the only significant relationship that we found was with relation to climate change and anger. So what you see here is that generally, the more people felt affected, that the strong emotions related to climate change affect their daily functioning and mood, the more the climate change body map was similar to anger body map. And just to illustrate how it looked like, this person over here whose climate change and anger body maps were very much dissimilar, indeed colored in very different body parts. There was no overlap here at all. Whereas this person on the other end of the spectrum, I'm not quite sure if you can see it very well, but colored in exactly the same body parts for anger and climate change. So those maps were indeed very, very similar. Okay, so what can we conclude from all of that? Well, first thing is quite important, is that climate change body maps showed relationship with several different emotions. So it's not that what people fear with relation to climate change is only anxiety or it's only depression. It's many different emotions. And anger seemed to be this one particularly important emotion related to climate change that may be affecting people's daily functioning quite striking. And we also think that possibly anger might be this one climate emotion that we can specifically act on and work on, maybe activate people, like motivate people into action, using the anger into action. But this is something that we would really like to explore in the future. And with this, I would like to very much thank my team for help with this study, especially Dominika, Bartek, and Arthur. And yeah, I'm very happy to answer questions later on. Yes, thank you for your attention.